the first thing you need to do is, whenever you want to create any animation in Moho Studio, is drag this layer, put it in a group, then convert it to a bone layer. Come to where you see new layer, this point here, then you create a group, or you group with selection. If you have it already selected right here, you create and you hit group with selection. Automatically it selects that layer and puts it in a group. Then what you have to do is double click on it and call it mouth, or depending on what name you want to give it. And since you have that, the next thing for you to do is right click and convert to bone layer. Okay, now that we have it as bone layer, what you can see right here on the tool section is all the tools we need to create whatever animation we want for the mouth. So whenever we create animation for the mouth, the things I like to do, because using bones to create mouths could be a little bit tough, but one of the things I like to do is create just 3 type of mouths that helps in animation, or sometimes 4. I create certain vowel sounds that whenever you use them anywhere, this is a standard, anywhere you use them, it will help you mimic an original mouth shape for whoever is talking. And this is a secret I'm about to reveal to you, so pay full attention. Right now, the next thing you need to do, or the next step you need to take, is go to your add bone tool and add a bone to this layer. You don't need to add a parent bone. All you just need to do is add a bone to it. Alright, you pick your add bone tool, which is this tool I'm clicking right here. You pick your tool and you click and drag. So the reason I'm giving enough space is so that when you copy this mouth and place on your character, you have enough space to play with. Then you go to your bone strength, which is this one, then reduce that bone strength. Okay, then you can go to this bone and give it a name. So when you hit your select bone tool and make sure this bone is highlighted right here like this, you see the name of the bone is called B1. So we don't want the name of the bone to be B1, we want the name of the bone to be open and close. So what I just did here is to name the bone, to make sure the bone names open and close. The reason you name the bone here is so that when you create an action, you can use this bone to control that action. So we'll go ahead to the action tab right here and come to this point where it says new action, and we click it. So you can see, because the bone is highlighted, make sure the bone is highlighted, and once the bone is highlighted, you see open and close appear automatically there. If the name was not open and close, you would see B1, which is the initial name of it. Then you hit OK. Now it brings us into a new timeline of that action itself. So you could move further, maybe frame 24, frame 48, or whatever you want to start your action. The next thing for you to do is to add a bone constraint, which I should have done before we get into this stage, but you can still do it at this point. You go to your bone constraint tool. Since the bone is highlighted, you go to bone constraint, hit angle constraint, and you have this angle constraint. The reason you want that is so that when you raise the bone up and down, it is constrained to a certain limit and it's easier for you to rotate. Alright, since you have that bone constraint turned on, the next thing for you to do is go to your transform bone tool, which is this, and rotate it downwards. Okay, now we want the lower lip to open, because when you talk, majorly it's your lower lip and jaw that moves more than the upper lip. The upper lip is almost static in a sense. So if you're trying to emulate this in animation, you need to always make sure the lower lip moves more than the upper lip, because when the upper lip start moving, it kind of looks weird. You know, not except you are going for full frame by frame, which could be really tough for those who want to really create quick animation. Okay, the next thing for us to do is go to the mouth layer, open this folder, go to the mouth layer, and on that same point 48, all you have to do is come down here and highlight. Once you click on the line like this, you could see all these points have been highlighted, and once you have that, you hold shift and drag it down. You could drag it as much wide as you want, depending on what you want, but for this tutorial we just want something simple. So I'll drag it up until this point, so you can see where this point now drags to and this one drags to, right? So what we have to do is now go to our select tool and deselect everything and select only just this point at this moment, then drag it up onto this point. You could zoom in and make sure we have them at the same point, because you always want to have them at the same point. We do the same thing for this layer. Select and drag it back to its original state, because when you talk, your lip don't move that way, isn't it? Okay, so we now have this. We could go ahead and adjust the lip to look much more proper if it's not looking proper. Okay, so we now have this. It looks really weird, I know, but don't worry, we'll get to it in a minute. Then all we have to do is adjust the lip properly so that we simulate an open mouth. Now keep in mind that while you are doing this, you could have a lip reference by the side to help you if you are not really used to making the mouth look open, or you are not used to animation. The reason I can do this is because I'm always creating animation, so I know how a mouth should open to a certain extent that it's usable anytime. And besides, even if you open the mouth very wide, you can always play around your bone, because when you move like this, so you could just open the mouth to this level instead of opening it up onto, instead of what am I saying, instead of opening it all up. Woo! English is not my first language, forgive me. All right, so now that we have this, keep in mind also that when the mouth opens, we don't have the lip looking, perfect like this. So what we have to do is straighten this out, because the mouth has, probably open, and give it this U type of shape. All right, so we have our shades, so we bring the shades down the lip. Then this other shade didn't move, so it's fair. So we have our teeth, we'll bring the teeth down. Then we have this other teeth, and we'll bring the teeth down. Then we have our tongue, which is this. We'll scale it down and hide it somewhere here. So when somebody says ah, this is what we have. Ah, so when you open your mouth like I am coming, there's a little part of the tooth that reveals itself, not all of it. So what we'll try to simulate here is just little part of the tooth like this, then probably drag it out so that it fills up the space of the mouth. Same thing for the top and same thing for the bottom. Sometimes people, when illustrators draw, they might make only the top lip show the tooth and not the lower lip, but I think it looks more better when both shows it. So we'll straighten out the top lip also and give it this smooth look like this. So you have this really cool. Control R to preview. All right, so I think this looks really good, really good. So this is an ah, then you have the back of the mouth, which is dark and all. Right now we have an ah mouth, which is the first phoneme for you to create an easy mouth movement. And if you have this, you could just use this for all your animation, just making it work like this, and your character is already talking properly. But if you notice something that we have to correct here, at this point everything looks okay, but at frame 24, if you notice, you could see the back of the mouth hanging out. So we'll come here, take our select tool and drag it in, Ctrl Z. Make sure you select that point specifically and drag it in. All right, then we'll go to this point also and drag it in. All right, then let's move to frame 6 and see what we have. Do we have something like that? Though we can't see it, but we can also just drag it in to make it much more perfect, and we drag it to this point to make it much more perfect. So at frame 1 it's closed, then we have our mouth dragged out like this. Then at this back to 48, because of the adjustment we made, we can drag it back in, and this looks perfect in itself. All right, so if we take it, drag it back and bring it in, so you could see the animation working itself out perfectly. So what about the tongue? If you notice, the tongue starts from here opening up, and this is not what you want. This is a different mouth shape, more like but that is not what we are after at this specific point. But you can go ahead and leave it. But during animation, while you are dragging down, if it's not on an immediate frame like from 24 to 25, you will still see the tongue show before it shows an ah, and that is not what you want. So at frame 1 we can go ahead, or at frame 0 we can go ahead, highlight the tongue, just the tongue, and drag it down, and probably scale it down also. Then at frame 1, while we open the mouth, you could see the tongue came back up because of this frame at this point. We can go ahead and scale it down and put it back. Then at this point, this is what we have. So we now have this, and the tongue comes up, because when it opens its mouth, that is when the tongue should come out. All right, so we now have an amazing looking mouth, which is 1, which looks really good. So we now have this. Okay, great. Now after making those adjustments, now you want to make the second mouth, which is an O mouth. Now we have A and we need to make an O. So because whenever we speak, we use a lot of phonemes or vowel sounds, and the major vowel sounds that looks like themselves are A, O, and T. Then maybe you could add an L, because usually an L is, when an L comes up, you can also use an R, an open and close mouth, you know, like I love, then U, then you have a U. So when the U is more pronounced, you would see it more than an L. But for this tutorial, we will go ahead and create an L so that you understand it much more better. Alright, the next thing for us to do is come to the mouth here, copy out the R mouth like this. Just copy the first frame, Ctrl C. Then we come to this layer, the bone layer itself, then double click on your main line. So we have our closed mouth. Then let's test it out. So we now have this. Alright, our mouth is working well. Now we go ahead and make the O or U sound, and we'll just make sure that our bone here is highlighted like this, and we come here to our new action. Then you see open and close 2, which is the second one, and you hit OK. Then we'll jump back to frame 48, then go down. Before we go down to the mouth itself, we'll pick our transform tool here and raise the bone up, really important. Then we come down here to the mouth and click Ctrl V to have our arm out. The reason we did this is that, you remember, we copied the arm out initially, and the reason we did this is to help us make our life easier. Instead of reopening the mouth, shifting the teeth, shifting the tongue and all those stuff, we just have an open mouth that we play around with, because the O mouth can be a little bit tricky to create if you are not really careful. Like I said initially, you can also go ahead and have a reference of how a mouth should look, so that you can look at it and draw it into place. For me, what I'm creating here, I constantly create this, so I think I have a good grasp on how it should be created. So if you are learning, as you are learning this, learn and watch me as I do this. So now that we have this, when you have an O mouth, the teeth doesn't show and the tongue doesn't show. We just have a circle or something that looks like a circle, and that's how it works. So the first thing we will do at frame 48 is reduce the size of the tongue and hide it at the bottom, reduce the size of the teeth, highlight the lower teeth, hide it at the bottom, and reduce the size of the top teeth or tooth and hide it at the top. Now we have an open mouth without those things to make it look well. Now the next thing for you to do is zoom in and pick this point here, either the front lip or the back of the mouth, whichever it is you pick. You just drag it to, let's say, this midpoint here. Then it is always wise to use the back of the mouth to start adjusting first before you use the main lip itself, so that it becomes a guide for you to create whatever you want to create. Then we'll do the same thing for this part. I would like to pick this side lip, and I'll bring this here like this, like this, like this, like this. Alright, then just make sure you have it a little bit inward like this. Okay, then the next thing for you to do is pick the lip point and bring it to that point to make your life much more easier and simple. Okay, then you bring this in, then you start to adjust the point. All you just do is adjust points from here on out. So just keep in mind that you are trying to create a circle, something that looks like an O, right? And you could also do a far more better one than myself, but for this tutorial I'll try my best, because I also want you to have this same file that you can work with immediately on your animation. And yes, we now have a lip that is ovish in nature. Let's bring this a bit down and drag this like this. And you create a balance. So you come here and make sure that this point here is perfect. And you move to this other side and make sure that this point here is perfect. This is really important. So what we'll do now is the same thing we did initially, and check whether everything works perfectly well at frame 24. You could see what is happening here. We drag it and place it back in, and we drag this and place it back in. You could see it falling out here, and we drag it and place it back in. So you could see at frame 24 the mouth looks a little bit, warped. We can go ahead and adjust that. That is the point of all this, right? So you want everything to be, seamless, because at frame 24 is still a different open mouth that we can still use to do other lip conversation if we want, right? So we can adjust this point to make it seamless. Same thing with this one here. So we just have this like instead of an O, which is at frame 48, right? So we have this, and you could remember to always preview to see what you have and how it looks, right? And at frame 6 we have our lips coming back to its natural place. So if you notice something here, remember to always adjust to make sure it is perfect. Same here, though it's not being seen, but always adjust, because the little things in animation is what counts, right? Then we have our lips going back to its original place, and we have a boom. Remember that while creating these lips, we did a control copy of the at the initial stage, right? And we had not, done any control copy recently. We'll be using that to also create the T sound for the lips. So let's go ahead. And what we'll do now is click on the main layer, the bone layer, and double click on the main line, and we'll go back and to test out what we've done. We have and we have O. All right. So now it's time for us to create the T. All we have to do is now use our select bone tool, deselect all bones on that layer. Now go to our add bone tool. I like to draw this one on top like this. Then we take our bone strength, make it 0 here like this. So you could come here also, instead of dragging it from this point, you could drag it also from this point. That being said, then we'll come here to our bone constraint and create our angle constraint. We'll close that, and we name the bone, we call it T. And now this T represents vowel sounds like C, T, E, Ch, and so on and so forth. All right. So the O represents O, W, and so on. And the R represents, and so on. So that is why this three vowel sound, when it comes to creating a mouth, which I have found out really helps you create, an amazing lip sync that when somebody watches it, nothing is out of place. and it looks much more smooth because you are using bones. Okay, moving on, we'll go back to our action here and create new action. You could see the T has appeared here, and we hit OK, and we'll go to 48 and we drag this to the side, and we go to the mouth at 48, Control V. Remember, we had copied that, but if by mistake you had done something different, all you have to do is go back to your first open mouth, which is the open and close one without the two, double click it, come to this layer here, copy the frames right here, then you go back to your T and paste it in. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now that we have this T, what we need to do right now is just hold Control, pick our select tool here, and highlight all these points like this, and just drag it up a bit, holding Shift, and you drag it up a bit, right? Because whenever you make the T sound, your mouth is not all that open. So while you drag it up, all you have to do now is adjust all these parts. So you hold this and deselect and pick your transform tool and adjust the mouth accordingly. Then all you have to do is this. You could see what I'm doing, adjusting the points that are clamoring on themselves. Forgive my English in case you are really awesome at English and you are wondering what I'm speaking, please. Alright, now that we have this looks like an air, so all we have to do is bring the teeth down like this and select the one below and bring it up, and we have a E, T, C, and all we have to do now is drag this up like this. But what I will do right now is something really fun. I'll drag this point here and click on this point here and hit Control M to make it bulgy, or to make it round rather. Then I'll drag this and bring it up to this point, and I'll just adjust it accordingly so that we have a smooth feel, right? Then I'll do the same thing here, drag this in like this, so have a smooth T, this the same, and I'll drag this here, same, I'll drag this here. I found out that when it looks a bit smooth like this, it's really fun to look at, right? So we have this and this. So if I do this, all right, so you can see how when the teeth, there's a little bit of gap in between, it makes it look, much more realistic than having this boxy kind of look. It also depends on the character you are trying to create. All right, so and if you look at this, you can see here it's a bit bulgy, but though it shouldn't be all that perfect though. But if you want it to be super perfect, you can put all those things into consideration. And also I want you to take note that when you get the file, you can also go ahead and make these adjustments as you want. That's the beautiful thing about Moho Studio. You can always make adjustments to whatever you are creating, and always remember to save your file, because since I started this I had not yet saved the file. So I'll quickly do that and I will see you in the next section. Welcome back. The next thing for us to do is, as usual, drag our timeline backwards to note which parts are not working properly. At frame 24, as usual, we see that it's not functioning the way we want it to function. So we select that point and pick our transform tool and drag it to where we want it to be to make sure it is good. And keep in mind that point I'm dragging behind, that is the back of the mouth. Always zoom in to note what is happening so that you do it properly. Don't always assume that it is perfect. Okay, then at frame 6 we have the same thing, though it is not being seen, but it's still wise to adjust it. Same thing for the right hand side, and we have a perfect mouth. T, close T, close T. All right, then we come here to our tool, our mouth bone tool, and double click on the main line, and we have this. So At the same time, we would like to have the names of this popping out so that when we want to create, when we put it on a character, we will now need to, know what we are moving. So we'll select both bones by clicking on our select bone tool and highlight, click and drag like this, and we'll go to show label and we have this. So we have mouth open and close and we have the T. All right, so we can also move them the way we want. Both are selected, so we have to deselect. Make sure you're on frame 0 before you are making this move, because if you are on frame 1 it will drag in itself. So we'll drag this to somewhere where we can see properly, and we put this somewhere where we can see properly. All right, so now we have different mouth shapes, which we have A, O, then we have this, then we have T, right? Now these perfect mouth shapes are all you need to create the perfect mouth animation, if mouth animation has always been your problem. In the next section, I'll be showing you how to animate this mouth properly using an audio file. But you can also go ahead and add an L shape if you want. I will show you how to add that real quickly so that you can also use that as you create your animation. So I'm going to add an L shape right now. So let's go. So for us to add an L shape, what we have to do is come back to this T layer, right? And instead of creating a new bone, calling it L, we can do it on the same T layer, since we haven't used the second part, because Moho Studio gives us the opportunity to create like 1 and 2, right? So we'll come to this T layer. Since it is selected, I'll come to my styles here, new action, and T2. Right, I know it is not T2, we know it's an L, isn't it, that we want to create. All right, then we'll come to the mouth here, and remember we had once copied the R mouth opening, and all we have to do is just Ctrl V to put it again, because the mouth is always turning, the mouth is always opening, so why not, right? Now since the mouth is open, the only thing you need to do when someone makes an L shape, how does it look? When somebody say the mouth is open, and you have a little bit of teeth being shown, and the bottom tongue and the tongue itself is touching the top of the behind of the top tooth. So all we have to do is just select the tongue and just drag it like this, basically, right? And make sure the tongue is like wide enough from the base. Then we have this simple like triangle, so it doesn't look too weird, right? Then all we have to do now is select, like before, all this point, because the mouth shouldn't be that wide open when it says L. Then you drag up, so you could see as I drag up a bit, we now have it looking more like an L, right? Then we drag this in. Now, a side note, because it's a creative way of creating animation. Animation has no animation is all about creativity. So this could be done in so many different ways. Now, what I'm preaching right here, it is my method. It is my opinion. It is not something that it's of. It is not something that if you don't do it my way, there is no any other way. No, there are so many ways, and you could also come up with your way. But I have been using this method in the industry for a very long time, because I have worked with a lot of big companies, and it has always helped me create animation in the fastest way possible. That is a side note, so keep that in mind. All right, so we just create a triangle like this, and we have an L shape. Adjust it properly, and we are done. All right, we have an and you can see how beautiful it looks, and we are done. But remember, we haven't rotated this bone to the right hand side where it should pick up the L. Don't make the mistake of rotating it to the left hand side where we have the T initially. So in order not to confuse you too much, all we have to do is go back to the bone layer here, then pick your rotate tool and rotate it to this side. So we have this. All right, I think that looks very good. So we'll go back in there and go to frame 24 and let's fix this real quickly. Same method, same concept, same everything. That is how easy it is. When you practice this and you can do it in a space of, let's say, 20 minutes, then you are good to go. At frame 6, drag, put it in, and I think it's perfect. Never assume, always check, because it is when you are creating your animation you now realize that, oh, I think something is missing, right? And you don't want to keep going back to readjust. It takes a whole lot from you, right? So we'll come back to our mouth layer here, double click on the main line, and we have our wonderful mouth finally created. Congrats if you followed the tutorial, if you have followed the tutorial up until this point. And I think with this you can create your own mouth, and if you don't want to, you can go ahead and purchase the one available to you that you can start using immediately. All right, so let's go and test it out. We have or, then we make sure it's closed before you work on the other mouth sounds. So we have the T. Now the reason why we're having this is because I have rotated this bone to the same point where the T is, and we have the L working at the same time, and this is an easy fix. I'll go back into the T2, come to frame 48, pick my rotate tool and rotate it the other way around. My mistake, I missed it, and it always happens because you are creating, and whenever it happens, this is a quick fix for you. Then I go back, double click on my main line, then let's test it out. So if I click here, I have my L, and I click here, I have my T. You can see it's fixed. Now I will repeat. The reason you saw that happening was because I rotated this action to the same place where the T and L is. So one needs to be at the left hand side and the other needs to be at the right hand side. So make sure you don't mix the two. All right, that being said, our mouth is fully complete, and I will show you how to use this mouth animation in the next section. Thank you for watching up to this time.